Hi, I'm Talitha. My sister's fiancé collapsed at the exact moment I announced my promotion at a family dinner. Convenient, right? But what if I told you it wasn't the first time that every milestone in my life was overshadowed by a medical emergency, always his, always timed, always perfectly dramatic? What if I told you my family didn't just believe the lies, they built their loyalty around them? And what happens when the forgotten sister finally collects enough evidence to prove everything was staged? Would you still call it family? Or would you call it what it really was? A show I was never cast to survive in? It was just past 6:30 when I pulled into the long gravel drive of the house on Hawthorne Lane. The air smelled like cut grass and gardenia. I could see through the front windows, flickering lights from tall centerpieces, servers in black vests passing out wine. They called this a simple family dinner, but the valets in front, the private catering truck with Blue Ridge Fine Dining printed across it, and the string quartet warming up near the side door told a different story. I stepped out of my car, clutching a small box wrapped in plain paper. I made it myself, some herb soaps I'd been working on during the nights I couldn't sleep. It wasn't much, but it felt like the right thing to bring. No one had asked me to. No one ever did. Inside, the house looked like something out of a Southern living spread. Vera had spared no detail. From the lemon eucalyptus candles lining the stairs to the place cards embossed in gold, it was clear. This wasn't about family. It was about image. I walked over to the table by the entrance, where gifts were neatly stacked. Mine felt out of place between the designer bags and fancy wrapping. I set it down quickly, hoping no one noticed. Moving toward the dining room, I looked for my name among the elegant calligraphy place cards. Each one sat proudly above gold-rimmed plates, except for one, mine. Mine was a torn piece of Post-it note, scribbled in Sharpie, T. Marin. It was stuck to the table, half peeling off. My spot was at the far end, tucked behind a thick support beam, half facing the kitchen door. The chair wobbled slightly when I touched it. A waiter passed by and smiled awkwardly. "You the media coordinator?" I didn't answer. I just sat down and adjusted my silverware, hoping no one else noticed how out of place I looked. People began trickling in, filling the space with hugs and laughter. Someone had prepped them with anecdotes, because each one took a moment to toast Vera and Gideon. My cousin Sam called them the couple with the golden touch. Aunt Rachel followed with, "Honestly, Vera's been holding this family up since college." Then someone called Gideon a miracle man, as if dating my sister was some act of divine generosity. My name wasn't spoken, not once. At first, I thought maybe they'd save it for later. But when the fifth toast wrapped without even a glance in my direction, I knew. I wasn't forgotten. I was deliberately invisible. Aunt Maureen leaned over at one point and chuckled. "Wait, you still live here? I thought you moved to Arizona or something." I smiled politely. "I live 3 miles away. I've been here the whole time." I stared at my untouched wine glass, swirling it slowly, and started piecing it all together. This wasn't the first time. It was just more obvious now. At my high school graduation dinner, Vera had shown up late in a neck brace, claimed she'd fallen off a curb. My friends and teachers ended up fussing over her, and I faded into the background. When I received my full scholarship letter, Mom said, "Let's not make a big deal. Your sister's migraines are flaring again." So we stayed home, in silence. Every time I had something worth sharing, something worth celebrating, there was an incident, an accident, a collapse. And Vera always ended up at the center of concern. They used to say, "Talitha's just more low-key," or, "She doesn't like attention." But I never said that, not once. I just got tired of being talked over. Across the table, I watched as Vera moved through the room like she'd choreographed it, one hand on Gideon's back, the other gesturing to servers like a seasoned event planner. Gideon laughed at something Uncle Harold said, but it was too much. His head thrown back, his body twisted slightly, then his hand rested on his right side. A performance without an audience. Except me. From the next table, my cousin whisper spoke just loud enough for her friend to hear. He's always on edge with his pain. Hope he doesn't collapse again. I set my fork down. Slowly. My hands rested in my lap, steady. I kept my face still, though I could feel my chest warming beneath my dress. I had seen this before. The gestures, the timing, the careful unraveling of attention, just when I was meant to speak. But this time, I didn't feel small. I didn't shrink. I watched the room, noted the glances, the glimmering glasses catching candlelight, the family laughing like a sitcom cast. I watched Gideon shift again, subtly, and Vera gently touch his arm. I'd come to this dinner thinking maybe, it would be different. Maybe people would remember I was still here. But I wasn't naive anymore. I didn't expect a seat at their table. I came prepared to flip it. I wasn't surprised when I saw it. That velvet box, so perfectly tied with a navy satin ribbon, centered beneath a small spotlight like it belonged in a storefront display. It had Vera's name etched on the brass tag. To Vera, with all my love, Grandma B. Just below it, my gift sat quietly in its store bag. No wrap, no ribbon, just a folded card taped to the side. To Tanya, not Talitha. Tanya. You learn not to flinch, just tell yourself it was a typo. Pretend Grandma's hands were shaking or her glasses weren't strong enough. Pretend someone else wrote it. You learn not to let it burn your throat when you smile. Because in this family, you don't cry over names, you swallow them. I straightened the card like it mattered, like it made a difference. Then I stepped away from the table and headed to the powder room, needing a moment. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I heard Vera's voice coming from the guest bath, giggling. No, fix the lighting. I don't want that glare on my forehead. This is going on the site, she said. A male voice replied, We'll edit all of it. Trust me, you'll look flawless. I froze outside the half-closed door. A makeup artist? For a family dinner? I peeked in. Soft ring lights were set up around the vanity mirror. A woman stood with a contour brush in hand. Vera sat with one leg crossed over the other, sipping a green juice. She wasn't dressed like someone attending a family gathering. She was dressed like someone expecting a camera crew. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about celebrating family. This was her stage. We were just extras. I walked away slowly, careful not to be noticed, and returned to the dining room. As I slipped back into my seat, I saw that the slideshow was rolling on a screen Vera had set up earlier. A montage of her and Gideon, vacations, charity galas, new house keys, posed candid kisses. One by one, guests were asked to share memories. First Aunt Susan, then Uncle Hal, then their daughter Ashley. Everyone had a story, a tribute, a laugh. No one looked my way. Not even a glance. I sat quietly, pushing a piece of bread around my plate. At some point, I wondered if I had actually been part of this family or just an extra in a production they forgot to cut. You always kind of disappeared at these things, a cousin once told me. You don't really fight for space. Maybe because fighting didn't seem worth it when the outcome was already decided. I glanced around. Vera fluttered from table to table, touching shoulders, kissing cheeks, posing between bites of dessert. Gideon stayed mostly in one spot, but everything about him felt rehearsed. He laughed on cue. He placed his hand on Vera's arm just long enough for a photo. And the way he touched his abdomen, too deliberate, too precise. I remembered a quote I'd read in a book once. Families don't always have to hurt you directly. Sometimes they just stop seeing you. At the time, I thought it was poetic. Now I knew it was diagnostic. And just when I thought I'd settled into the quiet invisibility they preferred from me, a waiter approached. He leaned in discreetly, voice soft. Ms. Calloway asked if you'd help coordinate the slideshow. We're having trouble syncing the music. My lips parted slightly. I hadn't agreed to anything. No one had asked. I gave a small nod anyway, because what else was I going to do? Argue? Demand acknowledgement? I followed him to the corner where the laptop sat. A file was mislabeled. Vera had renamed my folder Backup Visuals. Of course. As I returned to my seat, I didn't touch my food, didn't lift my fork. I just listened. To the curated laughter, the compliments, the sparkle of Vera's earrings catching chandelier light. Then I rose. Quietly. No one noticed. I stepped onto the back porch. The air was crisp, and the cicadas hummed beneath the trees. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "I'm not crazy. I'm just finally paying attention." Behind me, through the screen door, I heard Gideon's voice, loud, laughing, then a pause. A cousin muttered under her breath, "You remember what happened last time, right? Just hope he doesn't collapse again." And just like that, the ticking in my head began. I needed proof. Inside the house, the sound of silverware clinking and soft laughter drifted in from the dining room. I stood just inside the screen door for a moment longer, letting the chill air stay with me before I returned to the curated warmth of the evening. I walked past the dessert table, past the smiling portraits of Vera with Gideon, Vera with Mom, Vera surrounded by friends and toasts and lights. Not one photo of the people who weren't meant to be remembered. I slipped into my seat unnoticed. Again. But I wasn't focused on blending in anymore. I was connecting dots. I thought back to my college graduation. I had been walking across that stage when Mom's phone buzzed. Gideon had passed out at the airport. Vera had to rush him to the ER. I remembered the moment vividly. I was about to speak, my name halfway out of the announcer's mouth, when Mom and Dad stood up and walked out. I never made it into the family photo. Then, my first promotion at the nonprofit. I'd hosted a little celebration. Simple, just coffee and donuts in the break room with some coworkers. The same day, Vera called in tears. Gideon had collapsed in a yoga class. They couldn't reach his pulse. She needed to be with him. "Can we reschedule dinner?" she said, like it was nothing. The day I moved into my first apartment, he fainted in a Whole Foods. The EMTs said he was dehydrated. Vera said it was my fault for asking him to help carry boxes. And now? Now I was here again, sitting behind a pillar, watching it unfold. Gideon raised his glass as Vera gave yet another speech about gratitude and partnership and resilience. Halfway through, he pressed his hand to his right side and grimaced. Almost reflexively, Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a red handkerchief. That handkerchief. It wasn't just any napkin. I had seen it so many times, I could sketch it from memory. Embroidered with tiny initials, folded a certain way. It only came out when Gideon was in pain. Never before, never after. Always right before something shifted in the room. Always when eyes had to be drawn away. Vera caught Mom's movement and smiled at her like it was a cue. And that was when it all became clear. It wasn't chance. It wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. I excused myself again, this time slipping down the hall to the study. I needed quiet. I needed space. There, on the far wall, was a newly framed family portrait. Thanksgiving, the year before. I had organized everything, rented the tables, cooked the main course, ordered the pie from the bakery 2 towns over. I stepped closer. I wasn't in it. I leaned in, heart still, checked the angle, the lighting. I'd been standing next to Bryony, between Uncle Sam and Grandma Betty. That entire section had been cropped out, a clean edit, as if I never existed. My stomach didn't drop. It settled. In fact, everything started to fall into place. They hadn't just overlooked me, they had erased me. I sat at the desk and pulled out my phone, locked the door behind me. In the Notes app, I started listing. Graduation speech, Gideon's panic at the airport, first apartment move-in, fainting spell at Whole Foods, scholarship interview, Vera's emergency appendicitis, turned out to be gas, job promotion, hospital run for severe cramping, tonight's dinner, discomfort at the table, hand to the side, cue the handkerchief. They didn't just perform, they rehearsed, and I had played the role of the silent understudy long enough. I flipped to Safari and started digging. Gideon Ramsey, scroll, click, dig. There it was. A LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in years, buried under old resumes and cached PDFs. Research intern, Bayer Medical Trials, Charlotte. Under responsibilities. Assisted in data collection for Stage 2 trials involving controlled pain simulations and participant behavior. My chest tightened. Not in panic, but in furious clarity. He knew how to fake it. Not just fake pain, but mimic it, repeat it, time it. He had been trained to act sick convincingly. And Vera? She just weaponized it. I opened my messages and typed a name I hadn't thought about in years. Jake, the IT guy from my old high school. He used to brag about saving copies of every camera feed, every event. Not because he had to, but because he liked the power of having it. Jake, you still got access to Lincoln High's files? 3 dots. Typing. Paused. Typing again. Depends. You need something specific? Yes. Graduation day. Hallway near the gym. 10 minutes before ceremony started. Another pause. I'll check the archive tonight. I looked up at my reflection in the dark glass of the study window. My face looked steady, my shoulders square. I didn't look like someone unraveling. I looked like someone building something. And if I was going to take them down, I'd need more than memory. I'd need evidence. The bathroom door clicked softly behind me as I locked it, slipping my phone from my clutch like it was some kind of weapon. Maybe it was. Jake's text was waiting for me at the top of the screen. Got access to the hallway cam from your graduation. Grainy, but usable. Sending now. The file started to download as I sank down onto the closed toilet lid, balancing the phone on my knee. I had no idea what I expected. Part of me thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had built this all up too far in my head. But as the screen flickered to life, all that doubt dissolved like sugar in boiling water. There he was. Gideon. In the hallway just outside the auditorium. Alone. The camera was angled weird, high in the corner, but clear enough. He looked around first, making sure no one was watching. Then, slowly, he started rubbing his side, squinting in a dramatic wince. He staggered a little, leaned against the wall, checked his reflection in the glass of the trophy case, and ran through what looked like a full pain routine. Hand to side, winced, collapsed gently to the ground, practiced, measured. I watched it twice, then once more in silence, pressing pause at key moments. He wasn't in pain, he was performing it. They didn't just manipulate emotion, they choreographed it. I sat there staring at my own reflection in the mirror above the sink, thinking back to that night. The one where Mom and Dad left my graduation ceremony before my name was called because Gideon had blacked out in the parking lot. Now I knew the truth. I opened messages and typed one word to Bryony. "You saw this, didn't you?" She replied a few minutes later. "I did." Vera said it was a panic rehearsal. She told me not to bring it up, said it would just make things worse for him. I stared at her words until the letters blurred. I didn't even have the energy to be surprised. Bryony, always floating in neutral, always present, but never participating. That kind of silence wasn't passive. It was permission. I didn't respond. I just opened my file storage and created a new folder, Budget Planning 2021. I started dragging files into it, screenshots, the graduation video, notes, voice memos. And then I opened a fresh note and began typing. Always collapses mid-announcement. Pain is always on the right side. Same red handkerchief from Mom. Always calls for her. Never Dad. Recovery takes exactly 2 hours. Gideon's medical trial background. You don't bring down a dynasty with fists, I whispered. You do it with patterns and proof. I closed the note and stood up, smoothing my dress. I needed tea, something to ground me. I stepped into the hallway and padded toward the kitchen, heels silent on the polished floor. Colleen was already there, facing the sink. She didn't turn when I walked in. "You're not helping yourself," she said. Her voice was low, calm, like she'd rehearsed it too. "Don't embarrass your sister. If this is about you again, let it go." I stopped dead in the doorway, her back still to me. I kept my voice steady. "What about my time, Mom? Or am I not due one?" She didn't flinch, Didn't speak, just kept rinsing her glass, letting the water run too long. I stepped back out, tea forgotten, air too tight to breathe. In the hallway, I opened the voice memo app on my phone and hit record. Note to self: when your own mother tells you to stay silent, you stop asking for permission to speak. I returned to the dining room with a calm I hadn't worn before, not borrowed from Grace, not rehearsed. It was my own. I sat down, picked up my water glass, and looked at my mother. She was mid-laugh with Uncle Tommy, face turned just enough to ignore mine. I waited for her to finish. Then I leaned in, voice low but firm. "I'm going to speak tonight," I said, "and I won't need your permission." She didn't blink, didn't turn. Vera, a few seats away, was watching the room like a director on set. Gideon smirked like someone who thinks they've already read the ending. The toasts carried on, clinking glasses and curated stories about resilience, partnerships, the kind of family values people write in Hallmark cards, but never actually live. I let the chatter stretch for another few moments. Then, I placed my napkin down and turned to Dad. "When did you change the beneficiary on the family insurance?" The room went still. He blinked twice, caught mid-chew. "Excuse me?" "I checked," I said. "Last week. The forms were processed through the trust account. You and Mom signed off. It now goes to Vera." All eyes turned toward Vera, who didn't flinch. She reached for her wine glass and took a measured sip. Dad stammered, It was your mother's idea." Colleen didn't deny it. She didn't have to. No one said a word. I glanced across the table at Vera. Her necklace, pearls with a gold teardrop pendant, caught the light as she shifted in her chair. "That necklace," I said. "Isn't it the one Grandma promised me for my 21st birthday?" Vera smiled politely. "Mom said it never fit your style." I looked to Grandma Betty. She was focused on her plate, fork slow in her hand. Her eyes didn't lift. Of course, it was never about taste. It was about rewriting the family inventory while I wasn't looking. I sat up straighter and addressed the table. Not loudly, but clearly. "I've been edited out of this family long enough, but I didn't leave empty-handed. I kept receipts, texts, files, transfers, timelines." Gideon laughed, breaking the tension like it was a joke. "So what, Talitha? You launching an investigation?" "No, just reminding you that some people remember what you hoped they'd forget." "Don't do this," Vera said softly, just loud enough to carry. "Not tonight. Don't ruin this for everyone." "I'm not ruining anything," I replied. "You just don't like being seen in full light." "You really want to make this a scene?" she hissed. "Go ahead, but don't expect anyone to follow your drama." "I'm not asking anyone to follow," I said. "I'm just done walking quietly behind." Aunt Susan leaned in, whispered across the table like it was helpful. "Sweetheart, maybe tone it down." I turned to her. "I've been toning it down for 30 years. No one had anything to say to that. Not because they disagreed, but because they'd all benefited from my silence." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small flash drive, slid it across the table toward Dad. "This has everything, from taxes to timestamps. Open it or don't, but it exists now." Vera tightened her grip on her wineglass. Gideon shifted in his chair, less amused now, and I sat back in my seat, not smiling, not smug, just present. For the first time, fully present. But it existed now. My father slipped the USB into his inside jacket pocket, like it was something toxic he didn't want touching his skin. The room didn't speak, but it vibrated. Murmurs that skimmed just above the tablecloths, the kind of tension that stretches your back without you noticing. Eyes shifted. Wine glasses turned, refilled, but no one made the mistake of meeting mine. Vera kept her face turned slightly toward Gideon, who maintained his charming mask, as if none of it rattled him. He even laughed at something Aunt Susan said about aging knees. I didn't hear the punchline. The lights dimmed further as dessert was set out, and like clockwork, the screen on the far side of the room flickered to life. A TikTok video began playing, clearly preloaded, cued to the moment. It was Vera and Gideon, arm in arm on horseback, then beach shots, then a champagne toast at some rooftop bar. Over the montage, in Vera's own voice, came the line, "Built on trust, stronger than ever." The crowd offered half-hearted smiles. A few clapped politely, but the music cut out halfway through. The screen froze. I looked up, and there I was, standing in the blurred background of one of the clips. Out of focus, half-cropped, holding a gift I had wrapped myself. My hand tightened around my fork. I stood and stepped toward Bryony, who was seated near the edge of the main table, face pale but neutral. "Did you know they were going to play that?" She hesitated. "Vera asked if I was okay with her using footage from Thanksgiving. I didn't think it would be like this." I stared. Bryony dropped her eyes. "She said if I didn't cause waves tonight, she'd help fund my startup." "Ah," I said softly. "So you sold silence for seed capital." She opened her mouth, defensive, then softened. "No, I sold silence to keep peace." "Same difference." I walked away before she could respond. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was inventorying the pattern. Once dessert was set, I tapped the base of my wineglass with a spoon. A few heads turned, most paused. "If tonight is about celebrating trust," I said, "then let's toast the people who've broken it best." Some awkward chuckles floated in the air. Vera's expression stiffened, her mouth ready to intervene, but I raised my glass higher. "Some of us learned to keep our heads down. Others learned to perform. Some of us became invisible to survive. Others made sure they stayed centered, no matter the cost." Gideon stood suddenly. His body jolted. Hand to his side. Vera gasped. Too loud. Too fast. "Are you okay?" He groaned, shifting just slightly, as if dizzy. Someone called for help. Another reached for their phone. I stayed seated, eyes locked on him. Theatrics always lose their charm when the audience knows the script. The EMTs arrived less than 10 minutes later, must have been on standby. As they rolled in, one of them glanced down at Gideon's chart, then up at his face. "Huh," he said without thinking. "Didn't we just see you at that other engagement party last month?" The words landed like a dropped glass. Vera's face turned rigid. Gideon looked away. The room didn't gasp. It exhaled, like it had been holding breath for months. I stood now, not in panic, not in apology. "No one collapses at every celebration by accident," I said. "Not unless pain is more strategic than sincere." Vera's mouth opened, but for the first time, she had no words. And that silence? That silence said more than any toast ever had. The room had changed. You could feel it in the temperature, like someone cracked a window in a snowstorm. All those polite chuckles, the theatrical concern Vera and Gideon relied on, they dried up the second that EMT muttered, "Didn't we just see this guy at another party?" And once that seed was planted, it spread. Whispers began snaking between tables. Short glances. Lips moving behind wine glasses. Vera tried to smile through it, smoothing her hair behind her ear, saying softly, "He's just under stress. This is different." But no one asked follow-ups. No one offered help. Gideon stayed slouched in the chair, hand on his side, not committing to the collapse, but not abandoning it either. He looked like someone who'd run out of script. And then, from my right, low and deliberate, I heard Grandma Betty murmur, "Always on cue." She wasn't being cruel. It sounded like resignation. That cracked the dam. Vera stood, her voice pitched higher than usual. "You've always been jealous, admit it. You can't handle that people love me, that they care when I'm hurting." I didn't move. "This isn't concern," she continued, eyes darting between relatives. "It's sabotage." Her words hung in the air, loud, desperate, a little too fast. Gideon tried to cough again, this time quieter, trying to reclaim the moment. But it landed wrong. Everything was wrong now. "If telling the truth is sabotage," I said evenly, "maybe your version of love was never real to begin with." Somewhere across the room, someone coughed for real. A fork scraped awkwardly across a plate. Dinner was officially over, even though no one had said it. He walked out, down the side hallway, where the coat closet and laundry room met. I didn't need air, I needed answers. Or maybe I just wanted to catch them being honest when they thought no one was listening. I didn't even need to lean in to hear. Dad's voice. I told you this would blow up eventually. Mom's reply. She's the face, Richard. The whole family's built around her presence. We can't afford another scandal. So that was it. They weren't fooled. They were complicit. Convenience over character. I stepped around the corner. You knew, I said, all along, and you chose your image over me. Mom turned, startled but not surprised. You were always so hard to understand, Talitha. Maybe because I didn't perform pain for attention. She blinked. That was the only movement. Then she turned away. And just as I turned to go back into the main room, a ding echoed from the dining table. Vera's phone screen lit up and froze. Bryony, who had been trying to collect dishes to look busy, leaned over the screen. Her eyes widened. Wait, she said slowly, louder than necessary. Did you just text the family group chat? A script? Everyone looked over. What? Viri said quickly, but her hand shot out too late. Someone else was already reading aloud. After she starts her job story, Gid, go into pain mode. I'll come get you in 2 minutes. It was on the screen. Everyone had seen it. And once that happened, screenshots were flying. Vera lunged to grab the phone, her face draining color. It was a draft, she said. I didn't mean to send it. No one was listening anymore. Gideon had gone pale, not from an act this time, but because the air had shifted. There was no room left to hide in. Vera leaned into him and whispered sharply, We have to spin this. Say it was a joke. Say it was practice for a scene. I stepped closer, just loud enough. You don't spin a collapse. You recover, or you stay down. Then I turned to walk out. But I paused at the doorway. There's one more thing you should see. I didn't give anyone time to protest. I walked straight to the TV console, plugged in the USB, and turned toward the remote. The screen flashed once, then went black. A few people glanced up, mildly curious. Gideon shifted in his seat, eyebrows pinching. Vera stared, lips parted, but not in surprise. In recognition. The video loaded. Grainy hallway footage. Lincoln High School's back corridor, time-stamped the morning of my graduation. Gideon, alone, facing the trophy case like it was a mirror. Practicing, the stumble, the wince, the hand to the right side, the calculated, slow-motion collapse to the floor. Gasps scattered like broken glass across the room. I heard someone mutter, What the hell? Vera's face drained of color. Colleen stood abruptly. This isn't appropriate. No, I said calmly. What wasn't appropriate was erasing me for years. Dad sat forward, elbows on his knees. Gideon had gone still. No fidgeting, no pain gestures. Before anyone could find a reaction, the next file queued up. A voice memo. The room fell completely silent as Vera's voice played out loud, flat and businesslike. Make sure the pain kicks in after she says promotion. Just drop the fork. I'll take it from there. It wasn't edited. No one could claim it was deep fake. Her voice, her words, her timing. Uncle Henry sank slowly back into his chair, as if his spine had vanished. Grandma Betty turned pale, her fork slipping from her hand and clinking softly onto the plate. No one moved. Aunt Susan broke the silence with a soft, horrified whisper. How could you plan this? I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on Vera, who still hadn't blinked, still hadn't reached for the remote, still hadn't even tried to explain. A cousin 2 chairs down said, We thought you were just unlucky, not fake. Gideon finally opened his mouth, but Vera shot him a glare that made him close it again. I walked forward and stood where everyone could see me clearly. For years, I said, you all told me I was too much, too sensitive, too cold. But it turns out I wasn't the problem. I hit play on one final file. My voice this time, recorded the day before, in my kitchen. This is not revenge. This is release. I didn't look away. No one clapped. No one argued. Vera still hadn't moved. Gideon's hands were clasped together, elbows on the table, his shoulders slumped like a kid caught lying and too tired to try again. I stepped closer to the head of the table. Grandma Betty sat there, her face unreadable. I reached into my purse and pulled out the red handkerchief. I laid it gently on the linen tablecloth, right in front of her plate. "It was never about the cloth," I said. "It was about where you looked when someone needed help." She nodded slowly, eyes misted but firm. I turned toward the hallway. I didn't rush. And then I stopped, just before the door frame. "I'm leaving," I said. No one told me to stay. No one moved to follow. But I turned back once more, one hand still on the doorframe. "I have one last question, for all of you. Why was I never enough for any of you?" I didn't expect an answer. And I didn't get one. They just stared. Some looked down. Others pretended to adjust their napkins, their glasses, their sleeves. But not a single mouth opened, not even for a breath. Colleen blinked at her lap. Dad ran a hand along his tie, as if it might strangle him if he didn't. Gideon's eyes darted toward Vera, who sat motionless, like a painting someone had lost interest in. "Grandma Betty." She didn't look at me, but she didn't look away either. That silence? It was heavier than anything I'd ever heard. I turned to leave. The dinner, the night, the pretending. It was all done. But before I could take another step, I heard the soft crinkle of old fabric. Grandma Betty stood. She shuffled forward slowly, one hand clutching her purse. She reached in, pulled out a folded cloth, and placed it gently into my hand. A napkin, hand-stitched with my initials in the corner. "I made this for you," she said, her voice thin but steady. "But your mother said it wouldn't matter." I looked at the initials. The stitching was imperfect, one letter just slightly off. But it was mine. For a moment, everything stopped inside me. Then I managed to whisper, "It matters now." She touched my wrist, then returned to her chair like nothing had happened. But it had. That napkin said everything the room couldn't. Behind me, a chair scraped loudly as Uncle Alan stood and exited without a word. A cousin followed me toward the porch, but hesitated near the door. "I used to think you were dramatic," she said, barely above a whisper. "Now I think you were the only one honest." I stepped outside, leaving the door open just enough to hear what came next. Nothing. Vera and Gideon sat frozen, the hosts of a show that had gone off script. The quiet wasn't peace. It was detonation fallout, ash, not grace. I heard steps behind me. Colleen. She didn't try to stop me, just stood beside me on the porch like we used to do after Sunday dinners, before she chose Vera as the family's brand ambassador. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally. I wanted one of you to make life easier." "You picked the one who made it look easy," I replied, "and discarded the one who actually worked for it." She didn't argue. That would have taken too much energy. She just stood there. Let the wind wrap around her. I stepped back inside, only to find Vera trying to salvage something from the ruins. "This is all taken out of context," she was saying to the group. "Anyone could edit videos, splice audio. People fake things all the time." A voice from the end of the table said, "But no one edited your voice memo." Vera's mouth opened, then closed. Her skin had gone pale beneath her makeup. Gideon pulled out his phone, tapping the screen over and over, but the reception was dead. Or maybe the world just stopped listening. I didn't need to say anything else. They were doing the work for me now. As I walked to the front door, I wrapped Grandma's napkin around my hand, like a promise. I stepped onto the porch, the sky deepening to that quiet kind of blue you only see after something is finished. "They didn't break me," I said under my breath. "They just proved I was never theirs to begin with." My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Voicemail, blocked number. The voicemail played as I leaned against my kitchen counter, one hand around a chipped mug of tea gone cold. "Talitha," the voice said, male, older. Familiar in that way voices are when they know too much. "I saw your video online. That's not the first time he's pulled something like this. He didn't rush. He wasn't nervous. He was steady. He tried this at a pharmaceutical conference last year. Claimed to faint during a keynote. They paused the whole event for him. Turned out, he wanted to redirect attention from a botched product demo. Didn't end well. I'm willing to testify if needed. I listened to it twice, then sent it to a lawyer I trusted, a woman who once helped a whistleblower case out of Wilmington. She replied 15 minutes later. Clear, admissible, and brutal. Let's talk Monday. I uploaded it to the folder. Same one where the hallway video lived. Same one with the voice memo and the insurance records. All labeled plain and boring. Budget Planning 2021. By sunrise, I didn't have to leak anything myself. Someone else already had. The entire footage from dinner, Vera's voice memo, and even a screenshot of the group chat text circulating on Reddit, Facebook, X, and some niche legal commentary forum. It moved fast. By 9 a.m., Vera's name was trending alongside the words emotional manipulation, choreographed collapse, and PR meltdown. By noon, 3 of her clients had issued statements distancing themselves from her. By dinner, Gideon's former employer announced they were reopening internal investigations into past misconduct and fraudulent claims. I didn't celebrate, I didn't smile, but I did exhale. You wait your whole life thinking maybe someone will hold people accountable. Then you realize, sometimes, that someone has to be you. Later that night, Vera made a statement. It was soft-lit and clearly scripted. I, too, was manipulated, she said. I didn't know how deeply things had gone. I'm hurting, and I'm learning. The comments were disabled. The family group chat exploded. Some cousins sent messages defending her. She's always been so sweet. People say things they don't mean under stress. Others said nothing. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. And caring meant protecting my peace. Around 8, I got a text from Bryony. Just one line. I was wrong. I let fear win. You deserved better from me. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed, I never needed you to speak for me, but I noticed when you didn't. She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. The next afternoon, my father showed up. No warning, just knocked on the door like it was still the 90s and we were normal. I let him in. He didn't sit. He stood by the window and said, I should have spoken up. I let him keep going. I didn't want to lose the version of our family I thought we had, he added. I nodded. It was never real if it required my silence. He looked out at the street for a long time, then turned, gave me a nod, not of agreement, but of goodbye, and left. I didn't cry. I cleaned up the 2 tea mugs we never used and moved on with my day. That evening, a knock came again. This time, it was a delivery. Certified letter. I opened it by the sink. It was a subpoena. Court appearance. I ran my thumb along the edge of the page. Not fearfully, just to feel its weight. Then I stepped into the sunlight, pouring in through my apartment window. They wanted silence, I said aloud, to no one. Now, they'll have to hear every word. The subpoena sat on my kitchen table, unopened for 2 days before I picked it up again. The seal had been broken, the contents skimmed, but I couldn't bring myself to respond to it. Not at first. Not because I was afraid. Because I was tired. I wasn't looking for punishment. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone. I didn't need them destroyed. I needed them documented. I planned to show up. I would testify. I would answer every question clearly, calmly, without venom. Because the truth didn't need fury to stand. It just needed daylight. I don't want revenge, I told my reflection one morning, brushing my teeth with the bathroom door open. I want clarity. I want the last word in the room, to be honest. 3 days before the court date, Bryony knocked on my door. She was holding a white envelope and looked like she hadn't slept. I wrote this the night after the dinner, she said, but I didn't send it. I was scared. I read it while she sat on the couch. hands clenched. I didn't stand beside you because I didn't know how to do that without losing the rest of them, the letter said. I should have. And I'll live with that. When I looked up, she was crying silently. I forgive you, I said. But don't mistake that for permission to pretend nothing happened. We're not broken. We're just different now. She nodded. We hugged briefly. Then she left. That same night, Vera left a voicemail. I almost didn't listen, but curiosity still lived somewhere in me. Her voice was shakier than usual, but she wasn't crying. No apology. Just this. I hope you find peace in all of this. I deleted it. Some peace, I've learned, comes from refusing to reopen doors that lead nowhere. The story, of course, had left our family. The footage had bounced across platforms, shared by strangers, who didn't know us but saw themselves in the silence we'd lived in. It had become something bigger. Women messaged me, a few men too. Former colleagues of Gideon, former classmates of Vera. One woman wrote, "You gave me the courage to walk away too. My pain was never as organized as theirs, but it was invisible just the same." I stared at that message longer than I meant to, then replied, "It's not too late to be seen." She responded with a heart. The next morning, I opened every drawer in my apartment that still held something I didn't need. I folded up photo albums, a box of old birthday cards, letters from Colleen. I put them all in a storage bin, sealed it, labeled it simply, "Not now, not trash, not forgotten, just not here." That afternoon, I bought a one-way ticket to Oregon. I'd been invited to speak at a women's leadership summit about voice, boundaries, and rebuilding after betrayal. For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. Packing was easier than I thought. I didn't need much. When I boarded the plane, I chose a window seat and pulled a notebook from my bag. Blank pages, a clean cover. I opened to the first and wrote, "My story didn't begin with them, and it won't end with them either." The man in the aisle seat leaned over a little. "Are you a writer?" I looked at the page again, then smiled at him. "Not yet." I didn't walk into the courtroom. I didn't need to. My statement had already arrived. 4 pages, double-spaced, emotionless in form, devastating in substance. The lawyers had it, the judge had it, and so did everyone who mattered. Because justice, I'd come to learn, doesn't always sit on a bench in a robe. Sometimes it's held in the quiet hands of someone who refuses to be invisible again. The media tried to guess why I didn't show. She's scared. She wants a settlement. She's hiding something too. I didn't answer. I didn't grant interviews. I just let the statement stand. I have no interest in revenge, but I do believe in remembering, and in truth being the last voice heard, even when the room pretends not to listen. The clip from the dinner, Gideon's rehearsal, Vera's memo, the moment of collapse gone wrong, aired on national morning shows, talk radio, podcasts, even a cable news panel where some anchor tried to blame me for weaponizing transparency. Vera lost her campaign deal with one of the largest cosmetics companies in the country. The press release was cold. We no longer align with the values displayed. Gideon was formally indicted on insurance fraud, falsifying documentation, and defamation. His name was wiped from the professional circles he'd once used to inflate his image. Their shared social media account posted a solid black square. No caption. No comments allowed. Just silence. Finally honest. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. 2 weeks later, I walked on stage at the Oregon Women's Leadership Summit. The room held about 400 people, women in tailored jackets, some in sneakers and jeans, a few with tears already in their eyes, and I hadn't said a word. "There's strength in survival," I began, "but there's power in clarity." The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt ready. I was raised in a family where performance was everything, where spotlight meant survival, where pain, real or fake, became currency. I stayed quiet because I was taught that honesty makes people uncomfortable. But silence is a skill learned under pressure. And forgetting yourself to keep peace is not peace. It's erasure. Applause rose, slow at first, then steady. I glanced down at my bag. The hand-stitched napkin Grandma Betty made for me was looped through the handle like a scarf. Soft, quiet, true. I didn't name names. I didn't show videos. I just told the story of a woman who reclaimed the right to narrate her own life. Betty, I said near the end, never asked me to be loud, but she never told me to shrink either. When it ended, people stood, not for the spectacle, but for the truth. The next morning, I rented a car and drove down familiar roads, ones I used to take as a teenager just to feel like I had direction. I pulled up to the house I grew up in. The porch looked smaller, the grass less intimidating. I didn't ring the bell. I slipped a letter into the mailbox and walked away. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just building something where I'm not erased. And I meant every word. That evening, I sat on the porch of a small cabin I'd rented outside Eugene. The sky was bruised with fading light. A breeze picked up. I opened my notebook, the one I'd brought on the plane. Not every villain gets punishment. That's not how the world works. But every survivor? Every survivor gets the pen. I finished the sentence I was writing, closed the cover, and smiled.